Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights. Here are your hosts, Hector, Kolonas, and LaRosa.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. This is another weekly recap. I am Hector Kolonas. I'm joined today by my awesome co-host, LaRosa, and we're joined by a guest co-host, Momchil Blaskov. Momchil, how are you today?
I'm great. I've been following you for quite some time and really pleased to be finally here.
Great to have you here. Mike, everything good on your side?
Yep, another week, another trip. I'm back in the blue this week in co-working bubble to be here.
Mike's traveling when he's in the blue Twig bubble. So just that giveaway if you're trying to track where Mike is. So this week's a fantastic episode. We've got a lot of really great content in the newsletter. So if you're not getting the email newsletter, go and sign up. Twig.co. Put your email address up at the top. It's going to give you all the information every week, every Thursday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern. But today's podcast episode is going to dive into a bunch of really interesting topics. First, we're going to chat with Momchil about the Visitor Hub and what OfficeRnD is doing to elevate the guest experience. We're going to look at what is a community manager anyway these days, and some more topics around is co-working more than just a perk, some market moves, and a whole bunch more. So Momchil is actually with us as the guest host this week because OfficeRnD is our sponsor, not only of the newsletter, but also of the podcast this week. And they use this sponsorship slot to really tell us or reintroduce us to this notion of making every visitor feel like a VIP. Momchil, can you tell us a little bit more about why the visitor experience is so important in co-working spaces?
Yeah, it turned out we're also quite surprised that actually community managers spend over 30% of their time into managing visitors, different kinds of visitors, deliveries. And at the same time, when we're also doing some research with visitors, that they feel like being in a airport security, more or less, which is not what we want to deliver as a co-working space. So there are like three main reasons why we focused on this one. The first one is that actually we want to really allow spaces to provide a smooth, delightful arrival for visitors, as well as to make sure that they save some admin time. The second one, which is often neglected by operators, is actually that visitors can be leads. And if you're not capturing visitor data and then turning into engagement, you're leaving revenue on the welcome mat. And the third thing is around really deliveries and packages, and they shouldn't vanish into the void. We came across a lot of conflicts between operator and members finding out where a package gone. So the idea is that we provide real-time delivery tracking. It's like a branded tablet that you put at the front end, which is fully skinnable with like logo, custom UI. You can configure check-in flows, fields, notifications, success screens, really extreme level of customization, which is needed to welcome very different type of visitors in one co-working space, such as coming for tours, for events, for meeting room bookings, whatsoever.
I love that quote. I just want to reiterate it. If you're not capturing your leads or your visitor leads, you're leaving revenue on the welcome mat. That's just such a clever way to put it. So I just want to make sure we said it again. So this has not been a new product, right? Obviously, you've had visitor experience for a while. Has it changed drastically in the last couple of months?
Absolutely. We had a very basic thing in place because we're not realizing how big of a pain point it is for our customers. And then since like we did a lot of work last year, but it's on the market since October, it's a brand new solution. As we realized that we want to need a much more depth in order to cover all these different type of visitors, deliveries, and to remove all these hours of the community managers in terms of that they spend of managing all this. And we also wanted to see happier hosts and happier guests with really having real-time notifications through multiple channels. Now we have text messages, mobile push, emails, and all this is customizable so that they can get also the right information about their delivery or respectively about their visitor.
So from what I'm picking up, from the different things that OfficeRnD has released over the last couple of months, it does look like you're finding those pain points and then building specific products around it. Obviously, a couple of weeks ago, you introduced Growth Hub to tackle the e-commerce piece. Now the visitor, this new visitor experience. Is this a part of OfficeRnD's new strategy to build new modules or custom implementations around these pain points?
Correct. We understood that actually also the way that even we're structured internally, so that they're always organized around different pain points, not only solve the pain point, but also identify things that they haven't thought about. So what you iterate and what I mentioned about leaving this revenue on the welcome mat, this is something that many of our customers haven't thought about, but since October, many actually are benefiting out of it. So yeah, that's a shift, I would say, in our mindset and the way that we built our product.
Investment worth taking. But you did mention the term multiple times in our conversation, and that was the community manager and how they felt that they were actually sitting at the TSA or at the airport control, having to do this kind of repetitive admin tasks. There was a post in the newsletter this week from David Walker, how a community manager, a title we use as an industry to capture around 10 different job titles. When we had a little conversation before this, we're like, what should we talk about? What quarter I? All three of us were like, yeah, this is something we should talk about. So I've been talking for a little bit too long, so I'm going to tee it up from Mike. Mike, what do you think? Do we need new titles in co-working?
I think it's fascinating. I think there's a human condition around putting titles on things and designating, are they ones or zeros? It's like very binary sometimes. And I was excited to talk about this. I have been a community manager. I've consulted with operators and helping their community managers. I think it's a great title that describes a lot of what you do, right? Whether it be introducing the space and welcoming guests, supporting members with their questions, yes, unclogging a toilet or taking out the trash. It reminds me, this goes way, way back. Nextspace used to have certain tasks in every job description. Whether they did a really good job. Shout out to Iris. They had most of their locations had two core functions. They had the community manager, and then they had someone that was in charge of this more sales aspect type component. But all of those job descriptions had take out the trash, pick something up off the floor, clean the bathrooms when needed or whatnot. I think that maybe sometimes we get a little too focused on this, just like a lot of us are right now hearing about efforts to retake the name Coworking. Like, I didn't know anyone took the name Coworking. And so for me, I'm not opposed or offended by being called a community manager, or I don't see that. Maybe I'm wrong. If anyone out there disagrees with me, let me know. But I think it's a lot of these spaces don't have endless payroll resources. So you can't have 5 different people doing what is equivalently one person's job. So for me, I'm going to take the side of, I think it's fine. I think that it speaks to what they do. And if you want to come up with a fancier twist on it, like community connector, space ambassador, or whatnot, go for it. Do what works great for your space. But I think community managers, industry well embraced term that kind of covers that all.
Yeah, definitely agree on what Mike said. I have the same feeling about it. From our perspective, it's very important actually to help those people, as we're doing a lot of user research, and actually they're all across our platform. They really touch upon every single module, which even, and this is only what they're doing like digitally, not even to mention that what they're doing offline with other members. So that's why we're really looking for in the ways to, instead of changing the name, to put more content behind it. What I'm saying, to have the time to actually engage with the community and provide the service that operators are looking to give to their members. So I definitely love the community manager role and the way it's called, because at the end of the day, there's so many people also above them, especially in bigger operators. You can see operations telling them to do something. You can see people from finance, from accounting, and there is a lot of pressure from different ways. But at the end of the day, they're the face of the operator. So that's why I really like the way that it's currently established, and believe that it's more around how we put other things off them in terms of making it more easy for them to spend more time with members actually.
So I'm going to agree with you guys on the fact that the community manager role is a very community focused role. And so people who are in that role should spend more time interacting with humans and less time interacting with computers, interfaces, spreadsheets, checking people in and out. So I'm going to agree completely with you guys there. Where I'm going to disagree is I think we're getting to a point now where there's enough people interested in these hospitality-based roles that community manager as a catch-all does not provide enough of a ceiling for someone to stay in the co-working industry for too long. You join as a community manager, you become a community manager, and then what? There's no prospect of being able to build a career in co-working if you come in as a community manager. At least that's the way it's perceived. And I work a lot with the folks over at Flock, who's like the future leaders of co-working organization. This is one of the big conversations that a lot of new co-working professionals are wondering is what comes next? Where do I go from being a community manager? I'm doing all these things that fall under being a co-working community manager. But how do I take that next step? And so I think there is still something there that needs to be looked at. We need to maybe have sub roles or new terms. I hate throwing new terminology into the co-working industry. Most have listened to this before. We have too much terminology, but I do think that there is something there. We need to provide a career pathway for people who start at what is essentially the intern role, or what was the intern role of being a community manager, and how to become a careered community manager. What is the top community manager role there is? And I think that there is something there. At least that's what I took from the article.
Not often that we disagree, Hector. I think that career paths are not linear. And so I'm very proud of the fact that I started out as a store manager at Starbucks. But before that, I actually started out as a barista. And then I worked on my way up as a shift supervisor to an assistant store manager to a store manager. So in that scenario, yes, there is not exactly like a promotion path within co-working or flexible workspaces when you're dealing with like maybe a single operator, right? It's a smaller operation, one or two locations, smaller footprint, less resources. But there's nothing stopping someone from learning and falling in love with the world of community management or flexible workspace. And then maybe you go from a smaller independent operator to maybe a larger operator like a WeWork or like where there are other roles that can spread out within the organization. And that doesn't mean that you can't then not hop out and go back and then maybe create your own space, right? The challenge is, and maybe this is where I do agree with you, Hector, because there is not that clear trajectory path. It's not necessarily the onus on the individual, but it's the onus on the operator to establish like a training or development plan for what that person wants to ultimately accomplish. They might not want to be a community manager for 25 or 30 years, but they might identify or learn something that they're interested in that might be adjacent to. And I've seen folks jump from workspace operations into software platforms. They've OfficeRnD's hired folks, Proximity's hired folks for people that worked in the co-working space. So I think that we need to be a little bit more open-minded as to what the career path could be and have a little bit better conversation and maybe put the onus on the operators to understand and recognize and acknowledge that this might seem like a dead-end job, but in actuality, just like they support their members growing their business, they should be supporting the people that work for them and understanding where they want to grow their career.
And yes, I love that this we're an episode thing, and it's the first time we disagreed. So I look forward to disagreeing more with you and our guest hosts. But there was another piece that's fairly close to this, and it's an interesting one because it's not in the job description, right? No one joins a co-working space to save someone's life. right? No one joined the co-working space to avoid someone doing a tragically temporary, permanent fix or temporary, right? So there's a post that Bernie Mitchell shared about how co-working isn't just a perk and is sometimes a lifeline to people who are in your community and you don't know what they're going through. But little acts of being able to be present and being able to remember and ask them how their day is doing, ask them how their kid or their family is, grab a bite to eat, at lunchtime with your members. You do not know that impact it's having on people's lives. And so I really just wanted to make sure we got that into the newsletter, but also just bring it up as something that, it's not only the community manager, but also your members, right? If you're connecting your members and you're building that social fabric, you're fighting that loneliness epidemic, you're fighting depression, you're fighting all these things that you don't even think of as why you took a job or why we created the space of 99% of the time. I mean, worth noting that it is something that co-working is a part of. And I'm going to pass it over to either of you to take it from Ericus. Need a second.
I can take it. Yeah, my wife is a psychologist and been through familiar with depression from different aspects. And it's like sometimes it's very visible, other times it's not visible at all. And when reading through this, I was thinking generally about operators, what you said that sometimes can be really those connections that can turn the things around. But also in many cases, especially for people who are out of companies like freelancers and all these individual contributors, this might be totally invisible on the surface. So I was thinking, as a member, that I would love really to. It's great that we're having all those benefits in terms of like the cool coffee machine and all the great desks, headphones, and the resting areas. But also to have something around mental health in general as a thing which is ongoing and can help people really realize that they even have a depression, because it's not like always you can recognize it yourself. So I think that operators, but even for companies, but especially for individual contributors, start thinking more holistically around all these perks and benefits that they can provide, and having something around mental health also. Because in this situation, just going to the co-working itself was enough. But in many cases, there might be other people.
That's actually a really interesting point, is that we are seeing this trend of co-working spaces adding of wellness, health, mental health into their offerings. Now, oftentimes that comes with like a gym membership and, yoga and meditation rooms. But we're also seeing spaces that are created for therapists or alongside therapists or by therapists, who are all about creating supportive environments. And I just say there is an invisible network of freelancers and self-employed people who do you speak to when everyone you interact with are your customers, your partners, potential customers, family who are maybe relying on you. Like it's a really tough place to be. And I think that is something that co-working spaces can provide. And once again, I don't think that falls on the community manager's role, right? They're not trained in this job. It's not their responsibility to take this kind of stuff on as a responsibility. But I definitely think that there's something there. There's can be done. And it actually ties into another piece. So I don't know how you guys are doing this, but you're segueing us right through this. But it ties into another piece where co-working spaces are starting to add new revenue sources tied to things that are not traditionally co-working. So you mentioned adding of therapy and mental health services and check-ins. Maybe that's a paid plan, or something that they start monetizing so they can cover and provide a higher level of care, as opposed to something that they just do as a perk. That's something that we also saw kind of SpaceSpring adding this whole addition to their inventory system. Members can now book equipment like screens, webcams, microphones, and that kind of stuff. It's another undercurrent trend that we're busy looking at. The next underpath to AI and agent to be about this whole new stack of revenue that operators are experimenting with. But I wanted to just have a quick conversation with both of you, given that you both work at tech companies who build software and inventory systems for co-working spaces. Is this something that you're seeing with your customers? Is there a demand for people to be able to sell things to their members that aren't the desk, the office, the service?
For sure. Yeah. I think the number one item for the longest time has been monitors, right? So, how can you either ensure that there's a monitor ready and waiting for that user, whether it be a drop in? You don't have to worry about it necessarily for dedicated members or dedicated desks, but it's primarily for the aggregator user. Monitors, different dongles, different attachments or connectors. As we see more and more companies use conference spaces or meeting rooms, they're of course looking for additional equipment. And this is so interesting because I think that this has been a differentiator from co-working versus hotels or meeting venues, because in the past hotels will nickel and dime you. You have to sign a food and beverage minimum for the space, and then you have to rent from a third party vendor the projector, and you have to pay a third party vendor for the internet access and all these other things. Co-working, for so long everything's been bundled. The meeting room price includes the Wi-Fi, includes maybe a TV on the wall. Maybe one doesn't have a TV, but maybe that's because it's $20 cheaper per hour or whatnot. I think it's just fascinating to see as the industry evolves and as adoption evolves, there's just more things that people are looking for. And I think that also speaks to the change in the demographic. Um, on the previous topic of community and loneliness, yes, being a solopreneur or an entrepreneur or small business owner can be very isolating, very lonely. But those individuals tend to travel with like the office in their backpack. They've got all the dongles, the connections, or whatnot. I think a lot more of these requests that are coming are more so from the corporate employee that might have their own home office, but maybe they're in town for one meeting. They're not accustomed to having everything in their like Mary Poppins bag. So I think it's very interesting to identify where the requests are coming from, what type of user is asking for it, and then that would then support whether or not the space wants to take on that cost, and then also tracking it down. Are you charging a deposit if the cables grow legs and walk away? No, people might not be doing it intentionally, but they might just do it accidentally.
Yeah, overall, I think it depends by the operator. We see some like very white glove operators which won't have everything included, single price, a bit higher. What also Mike was referring to, like higher amount per rate per hour that you're supposed to pay. And it makes it much simpler, and then you can just play with different amenities, find a meeting room that works for you. And some others, like adding this, we call them in OfficeRnD, they're so-called extras, which can be charged on top, and having them separately. To be honest, I haven't checked the revenue of what revenue, if recently customers are generating more revenues from extras, but I can check it out to see also if there is some like decent trend into increasing this, and if more operators went to the direction of separating them versus the ones who package it all in one.
I'd love to see that data set. So we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you both very much for joining me. Thank you to everyone who's listening, who shares the podcast, who subscribes, who watches us on YouTube. If you want to find out more about what happened this week, head over to thisweekincoworking.com, click on week 17, and we'll be back in your podcast feeds wherever you listen to your podcasts, same time next week. Take care.